Welcome to Tranquility Magazine Podcast with your host, Jasmine Maya Royce.
Judith Arloff, MD, is the author of her newest book, The Genius of Empathy: Practical Skills to Heal Your Sensitive Self, Your Relationships, and the World. Dr. Orloff is a member of the UCLA Psychiatric Clinic faculty and is a New York Times best-selling author. She is a leading voice in the field of medicine, psychiatry, empathy, and intuitive development. Her work has been featured on CNN, NPR, TEDx, the American Psychiatric Association, among many others. She specializes in treating highly sensitive people in her private praxis. Thank you very much, Judith, for coming on the show today. We're very excited about you. My first question always is, what is your current mantra?
Oh, what a great question. I'm glad to be on your show. Thank you for the invitation. My mantra is one day at a time, and focusing my energies and all my love and my inspiration on one day at a time. And especially if there's any challenges going on in life, deal with them one day at a time and trust my intuition one day at a time.
Beautiful. I like the fact in your book you mentioned about how you connect with nature and you're around kind of more immersive in a tree or talk to birds, and it kind of resonates with that enjoying the day concept.
Yes, there's, the empaths around the world are contacting me, and they're so upset about the world situation and what's going on and feeling so drained, which I talk about in the book, how to set boundaries and not feel drained by that. But being in nature is one way to counteract all the toxicity in the world, and not just focusing on all the challenges the world is going through, but giving yourself that day at a time empathic gift of being in nature and slowing down and looking at all the little creatures and the birds. There's a bird app called Merlin where you could out the bird songs. We were just out in the forest, and as an empath, I love, on vacations going to forests, always go to places in nature, but you can listen to all the birds and identify them and really feel connected to the bird world. So there are all kinds of fun things you can do to remember to go back in nature as an empath and as a sensitive person to refill yourself.
True. I think it's deep. And I found out the other day that birds have a tendency to wake up the plant environment, and that's partly why they sing. And I didn't know that before, and I found that fascinating because everything in the world is connected in their own harmony and how they associate with each other, which is a beautiful understanding. But try to explain for the listeners what you have experienced and why empathy is a powerful word, but describe it, because you kind of display different types of empathy and what you kind of gear towards.
Right. Well, the genius of empathy is how to use empathy and access empathy as a healing force in your body and your emotions and in your life, how to access it. And there are different kinds of empathy, and you might have any of these kinds. These are kind of the default settings, the types of empathy I talk about in the book. Mm-hmm. And one is cognitive empathy, and that's more at the thinker's empathy, where you think empathy for somebody. There's emotional empathy, where many empaths have emotional empathy because they feel other people's emotions and actually take them on, which is not a thing to do. And then there's intuitive empathy, where you naturally read people. You have intuitions. Your gut feeling gives you a strong message, or you get flashes or knowings. And then there's spiritual empathy, where there's some people who see the best in others. They see the white light in others. They see everything they've done well. But the challenge is that they need to see the whole person and see the shadow side too. Mm-hmm. So little tweaks that I talk about and all the kinds of empathy and how to find balance with each type, no matter what your type is. And it's good to know what other people's types are too, so you can identify them and know how to be with them.
True. Yeah, I think I resonated, I don't know if about evolving to a different empathy structure for me because I started young as the feeling type of empathy, where even touch base, because I was geared towards massage and like being around physical training and helping with physical training, that I took a lot on at that time. But now I've come to a kind of transition that it's more intuitive style, because I've been able to read people for a long time, but I never had the skills to craft that and to be open to receive it because I was too afraid of all the feelings and emotions from everywhere. And you speak about the idea of boundaries and how to set up boundaries as an empath. Sometimes boundaries can be a mixed confusion of how one sets them up or how one finds them and what they are. Can you go into like an example or an understanding of what your interpretation of boundaries are and how to utilize one?
Yes, I want to say that it's absolutely essential that sensitive people, empathic people learn to set up boundaries. You can't get away with it. You to be a happy, healthy, empathic, sensitive person, you have to learn how to set boundaries. So anybody who's listening, I'd like you to consider that. And it could be as simple as no is a complete sentence, where you just say, no, I'm so sorry, I can't do that. I don't have the time today. I wish I could, but I can't. And the second law, really, in setting boundaries is make it short and sweet. Don't drag it out or cause a confrontation. No, just say what you want to say and say it in a nice tone of voice. As there's a chapter in the book on empathic communication, how to master your tone of voice, your eye contact, your body posture when you're communicating empathically. And so that's really important that, if you're saying no, you do it with love. It's a positive no. You're nasty. You see, a lot of people associate boundaries with nastiness or harshness or hurting or rejection, all of that. And so I'd like you to consider reframing that again. The way you set boundaries is just very lovingly, but it's taking care of yourself at the same time. And then there are harsher boundaries, where some people have family members that they just need to take a break from because it's been too much, of narcissism, too much abuse, too much inconsideration for too long. So you need to take a break to reevaluate, what to do with this person. You can't just keep doing the same old dance with them because it won't change. You have to be the one to change it. And sometimes people, in terms of boundaries, need to take that break for a month or a couple of months just to regroup and replenish yourself and find out a more positive way of dealing with them, if that's possible. Or if you must deal with them, realizing their limitations and not expecting more than what they're capable of.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in there to developing boundaries, especially with empaths, that we have the tendency to be people pleasers and put everybody before ourselves, because the power of no is a strong structure for you loving yourself from within, but that takes time to develop for some. But I agree with you on when you were talking about the family development. So can you explain kind of how an empath becomes so emotionally connected to everything in their childhood development or something related to that?
Well, the empathic child is a very sensitive being, and they tend to feel things like you're holding something with 50 fingers instead of 5. The sensitivity of the empathic child is exquisite, but they tend to get overwhelmed by the world, and they tend to take on all of the angst in the schoolyard, and they're prone to getting bullied and put down and shamed by others. And so it's important that the parents, take an active role in, zero tolerance for bullying and involve the school and fix that situation right away. Don't let it go on. And so the empathic child needs to know how to say, I'm no to other children, because even as children, empaths wear an invisible sign around them saying, I can help you. And children will flock far and wide to cry or tantrum or tell them their life stories, as short as they may be. It starts really young. And so if you just, give your child permission to, say a loving no, and to say, I've got to go, my mom's waiting for me, or something like that. It's really helpful, and how it's not their job to take on, other kids' stress. It's not, even though they might have a natural tendency to do it.
Yeah, I think it's part of your upbringing and you're ingrained in your natural ways, but not having boundaries. What I've read about and understood is that we're a prime candidate for a narcissistic or a taker rather than a giver in a relationship understanding. Do you think that's relatively common?
Very common. And the lack of reciprocity is a big problem in the empaths I treat, where the empath gives and gives, and maybe the friends don't reciprocate. And so they have to reconsider. And this is part of what I write about, is how do you, develop friendships where there is a reciprocation, and you just being the people pleaser or the giver. How do you do that? How do you talk to your friends? What do you say? I had, a patient who came to a workshop, and she just said that, she gives and gives, but when she, has a problem or she has a medical issue, nobody shows up for her.
Yeah.
And we asked her why. And she said she doesn't ask for help. And people get into a pattern where they're so used to you being the giver, they forget to give to you. And so you need to make it very clear in your relationships that, what she did, she went back to her relationships and asked if they were interested in reciprocal giving. And most are, but they said, we're just so used to you being the giver, we don't even think about giving to you. So you've got to speak up, as an empath, and the genius of empathy, it doesn't just happen on its own. You've got to speak up and take some risks and maybe go into areas that are a little beyond your comfort level to establish the friendships you deserve.
Yeah, I guess the idea of truly asking for help from someone that is a giver in nature, that wants to take care of everyone, and the power of being needed or intuitively being a people pleaser in general, to actually turn around to get to that point where you're willing to ask for help is a big thing. It makes you vulnerable in a way and needing something from others, and maybe scared to even ask that you could be denied that when you ultimately require it from someone. But it does have a tendency, from my experience in my readings, that you get and develop deeper and more open relationships that way, friendship or, intimate relationships, because you need that exchange to make it, develop and evolve more. You talk about relationships in the book a lot, and you mentioned the idea of holding space. It is a very important thing, but can you describe for the listeners what you mean by holding space and what it is for you?
Yes, in the chapter on empathic listening, how to listen with empathy, holding space is a key element. And when somebody's sharing with you, let's say you've decided, that you want to listen, and you set a time limit. You don't have an open-ended time for listening, because people could go on and on forever, and that will drain. Set a 15-minute time limit or a 10-minute time limit. And then you hold space for someone as they're talking about what they're upset about or what the problem is. And that means you sit there, not saying too much, and coming from your heart, and being able to give off heart energy to create a positive environment for the person while they're listening. And you do this by focusing on something you love. And it could be nature, could be the sky, it could be a little doggy like the one you're holding. It could be anything that opens up your heart. And then you hold the space, and you're not reactive to the person. You might just say, that sounds like it was hard, or nod your head, to show them you're there. But the talking part is after the listening part. So we've lost the art of listening. what I've wanted to bring back in this book is how to listen to someone in case you've forgotten or in case no one's ever listened to you. How to hold the heart space and be very supportive of the person and yet not intervene. The worst thing people do, it's a common mistake where the person is sharing something and then the listener comes in and says, oh, I experienced that 100 times worse than you, or my friend went through this. Then you lose the art of listening. You don't want to ever do that, because then it starts making the conversation about you or the essence about you. And you're listening. Listening doesn't mean sharing. Sharing is something different. And sharing is fine if that's what you're doing. But if you want to hold space for someone, you don't do that. They're the center of your universe during that time.
Yeah, I think it is true that what you're saying about the art of listening is a dying art. Most people are distracted by so many things and different concepts, and we have a memory of a fish. We're always over here, over there. Speakers are on, TVs are on. There's no quiet space. In order to reframe yourself to get into a comfort zone that you're not really initially trying to be defensive about someone telling you something about that is maybe related to you or the other person, and you want to sympathize. But things I had to learn about the teaching factor. Oh yeah, I got a suggestion for you. I got an idea, or I want to help people. But the thing is, learning that everybody wants to be seen and hold space and like understood and not really helped. Like those that want help will ask for help. But I mean, it is a mental concept. Being helpful, too helpful, some people do not even want your help. They just want to unpack or go on a rant or share what they're thinking and just someone to listen. And that's a good skill. But what do you think about like the boundaries that you have during that moment that you're holding the space for someone else, but not being reactive or taking on their emotions inside you?
Yes, exactly. And that's giving the person a big gift. And I also want to say that you might be listening to somebody whose views are quite different than yours. And so instead of sitting there judging them or thinking how horrible their views are and their opinions are, try and get larger and hold a heart space, at least for listening. You don't have to agree with them. That's what this is about, agreeing or disagreeing. It's about holding space for them to share.
Yeah, you call it love detachment in your book.
It's loving detachment. It's taking a step back instead of jumping into somebody's body and between them. It's taking a step back, having a bit more distance when you listen. As empaths tend to jump into people's bodies and feel everything and then get exhausted. You want to take a step back and have a little bit more of loving detachment when you're listening, letting the person be who they are in their own lane without you intervening, just listening. And don't look at your phone ever when you're listening to somebody, because that's a terrible sign to the person that you're bored.
Yeah. I think it makes you feel disvalued or not a priority or not important at all, because it seems like you're late. The other person is late for something else and you're not fully immersed in the presence and where you are right now and having the deep conversation that someone is trying to share with you, whether it's relevant to you or being a solid friend, relationship, or counterpart in any way. And what you do for a living, you already have the practice group for listening factor because it's part of your work and what you've been doing for a long time. So it makes you a skilled person in that department. But I think that, or do you think that you're more an extrovert or an introvert at this time or in your life growing up?
In my life, I'm definitely an introvert. I've always been an introvert. I've never been an extrovert, though I speak in front of, hundreds and hundreds of people. I could do that. That's a little bit different for me because that's not on a personal level. That's teaching. And teaching is different because I don't absorb energy so much when I'm teaching because I'm very centered. And unless I'm sick, I probably won't absorb anything. But in my personal life, I'm pretty quiet. I have a pretty quiet life, and I like to go to the beach. I like hiking. I like nature. I don't like being around big crowds or lots of people or noise. I'm a prototypical introverted empath. But I want to say that you can be an extroverted empath too.
Mhm.
I've known empaths that are extroverted, and then you could be an ambivert, which is both. You can be introvert sometimes and extrovert sometimes. So
Yeah.
you could identify with which type you are and accept that. And even though extroverted empaths, they need to decompress, they need to have alone time after they're with a lot of people. That's very important in order to keep your energy high.
You are correct in that, because it's like I'm more of an ambivert, but I didn't know that at the beginning because I grew up being an extrovert in a way. But then you realize that you feel exactly what you said, depleted and exhausted from so many people, that you need to go inside self and replenish that resource of energy and take care of you first before you go out there again and then be immersed by all these people and their problems, their difficulties, what they're going through, that you are naturally inclined to listen or help, but you also need to make sure that you take care of self first. So, when you're upbringing, how did you gear yourself towards empathy as your interest of choice?
Well, I didn't know what it was called when I was growing up, but I was an empath and I couldn't go into shopping malls and crowded places because I'd walk in feeling fine and walk out exhausted or with some ache or pain I didn't have before. And I would ask my mother. My mother was a physician. My father was a physician. I have 25 physicians in my family, so I have a strong heritage of linear thinkers. And my mother would say, dear, you need a thicker skin. You need to toughen up. You're just too sensitive. And, so many of us have been given that message. It's like all the parents got the same
Yeah.
that's coming up because there's so many people who have been called that. It's a form of shaming.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I had to heal because I thought there was something wrong with me growing up, which there wasn't. There was something right. I was just a really sensitive little girl, and I had strong intuitions, as so many of us do as children. And, it was just how I grew up. And so I had to, on my own healing path, which is, I write about in The Genius of Empathy, it was a process for me to I've been in therapy a good part of my adult life off and on because I really believe in it. If you get a good therapist to somebody, it can really help you through your blocks. And as an intuitive, I want to do that because I don't want my stuff getting in the way of reading people. So, I've learned with a lot of good therapy to integrate my intuition and my empathy along with my linear mind, that I can only be whole if I embody it all, because that's who I am. And to be myself, I need to be free with that and accept that, which I have, at this point in my life. But when I was a child, and I relish it and I enjoy it, I would never give up being an empath. Never. I just love how to connect deeply with things, as I love relationships, and connecting, and I love connecting to nature and myself. I love connecting to myself in meditation. And so that's a big plus of being an empath for me. And so, I've integrate, the linear mind and all traditional medicine with empathy and intuition at this point in my life. But for those of you who are just starting the path, no, it's a process. It's an adventure. It only leads you to a good place. So it's a very exciting journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful to understand that now in our timeline, we're a little bit more open to the idea of being sensitive and empathetic in as a child and development, because in different generations, it's been shamed, like you said, and it's not really been understood that you learn to compartmentalize or intentionally or non-intentionally to hide all your emotions and all your sensitivity down deep. But then a very key thing that you mentioned, therapy is an amazing thing for developing those boundaries, understanding your blockades and how to support you before you take on everyone else's things or just the world in general, because the world is in a very interesting transitional point, as well as ourselves, to figure out what's going to evolve and how we're going to grow in the next kind of evaluation of humanity. And so being empathic and having that emotional sensitivity does make you more human. But I don't know how much people are open to understanding the feeling concepts that come inside ourselves and how to deal with it when it pops up. Do you know like an experience about someone getting to a certain transitional point in their life that it has the forefront when you've shoved it down for so long, and how you have all the emotions? I mean, you could have every kind of excuse, northern man, like someone passes in your family, you have a divorce, or like someone else dies that you were unexpected, and how you deal with those emotions that you have not dealt with and how to kind of move through it.
Yeah, it's very important to have guides in your life. I've had very important guides who have helped me when I've gone through difficult periods, and also how to be a healthy empath and not be a people pleaser. And if it was up to me, I'd want to heal everybody. I want to heal the world. It's just not possible, though. I would love to. And my inclination is to do so and to try, but it's not going to get me anywhere, because that isn't how healing works.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just wave a magic wand and heal all of you as much as I would love to. You have to do the work yourself and connect to people who can help you along the way. And hopefully, in my book, it could be one of the teachers for you, but it's important to listen to people you respect who have traveled the path before, because there's a lot of similarities on this path, that people have as they live and grow into being their empathic selves. And I want to say a misconception that I addressed in the book is that empathy is a weakness. As people feel, it makes you weak if you're empathic. You're not steeled up. You're not hard. You're not strong. And that's so not true. Mm-hmm. It's not true. It's an empath without boundaries is a weakness. Being empathic without boundaries. But when you are able to set boundaries, when you're able to practice self-empathy, you're able to learn to center yourself, which are all tools in the genius of empathy, you get super strong. Sure, you can be steeled up. That's how, look at the world. These are all people who are steeled up. You have to have and strength. To just be steeled up, you're never going to reach the heart of anyone. You're never going to master their hearts and connect on that level. And so you can do both. And I think it's a mistake. In diplomacy, they look at empathy as a, quote, soft skill, which never sat with me that well. It's not soft. It's a powerful skill.
True. It's like that quote that I keep seeing. I don't remember it exactly. I'm going to say it wrong if I do, but it's that kindness is a weakness. Empathy is part of kindness, is no weakness, because it is part of that I feel everything while you feel nothing, or don't realize that you feel more than you're open to dealing with or feeling. So you have other books that kind of go in this flow of empathy, and you have the Empathy Survival Guide and Thriving as an Empath, along with your newest book, The Genius of Empathy, a practical skills to heal your sensitive self, relationships, in the world. Do you think it's, for you being a teacher, that everyone goes in a linear fashion, or you can pick which one you think, or which one has a different vibe or view for you that you would recommend for other people that are just starting that journey?
The Genius of Empathy is my most current book, and it has the foreword by the Dalai Lama, which is a precious, precious gift to me. And it tells you how to bring empathy into your relationships and how to have better relationships with yourself and others. So if you're looking to improve your relationships and your relationship to yourself, I would start with that one. And then Thriving as an Empath is a day-at-a-time book. It's a self-care technique for empathic and sensitive people, one day at a time. And it starts January 1st and it goes to December 31st. And it's a practice book where it's not a long book. It's like, it's 365 days, but one page is devoted to a separate practice, and how to have boundaries, how to ground yourself, how to tune in, how to get yourself back on center. So each page is devoted to that. And then the Empath Survival Guide is the beginning book, and it's the book where you can take a self-assessment test to determine if you are an empath. And if so, how much of an empath? And it gives you some basics on how to handle being an empath.
Interesting. Yeah, they all seem like they have relative concepts that may call to people in different direction, or they need it at different phases in their journey in their life to understand how to deal with their emotional intuitiveness and their sensitivity. You mentioned a couple times about being centered, and you also touched on meditation. So explain kind of what being centered means for you, and maybe meditation collaborates with that, and how you can merge the two to kind of find your wellness in self.
Yes, being centered means you're not thrown off by all the forces in the world, where you're like a tree, and a tree with roots, where you feel yourself and you're not wobbling or thrown off all the time like most people are. And so being centered, you can become centered through the breath, just taking a deep breath. If you're feeling that you're getting on sensory overload or too much is happening too fast, taking a breath is the quickest way to getting centered. And then meditation is something I suggest, and it's something I do every day. And it's a way to set aside your everyday problems, to breathe, to center yourself in your heart, to open up your heart and begin to send yourself some heart energy, and practice self-empathy, where you're kind to yourself and you say kind things and you feel yourself relax and you feel yourself come back to you, as you are the most important grounding point. And if you're always thinking about other people or external circumstances, you'll lose yourself. You have to come back every day. I suggest, even if it's only 5 minutes a day, to meditate, maybe have some candles on a table that you can light, and some flowers, which can remind you of beauty, and put it on a table and get a nice cushion and sit in front of that table. It can be your sacred space. And this will center you. It'll get yourself into the habit of coming back to your heart, of coming back to yourself, so that you can sleep better. As I meditate at night, before I go to sleep. And usually when the world is asleep, I meditate. It's really nice, very quiet. And then wake up fresh, or you can meditate any time of the day that resonates with you. This just resonates with me when the day is over. I could finally come back to myself.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to do it at night. And I agree with you on that, because I feel like it helps create your dreams and your day for the next day. You're prepared for the day being better than the day before, or you be thankful for yourself and what you did in the day. So it helps you to decompress. But meditation is a very key thing to have in yourself, no matter if you're empathic or not, but especially for us and people that are highly sensitive and have all those factors that you were touching on before, overthinking, and how you get caught up in the power of overthinking and overanalyzing everything.
Yes. And there's a chapter in The Genius of Empathy on how to stop overthinking and come from your heart. As overthinking is something Westerners really do. They make everything so complicated. And so, point, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And the point of, of the genius of empathy is to simplify things, to go slower. The thing is, with empathy, you don't go faster. I want you to go slower. It's very different than just the mind. And when you go slower, you could find yourself again, and you find the connection to everything. If you go slower, going too fast, you can't process everything. You can't process what you need to really do. And so you have to start all over again, the beginner's mind, and slow it all down, and come back and begin again.
Yeah, I mean, learning patience is a virtue. And I agree with that idea, but I didn't know what that meant until far later. And especially living here in LA, where you are as well, it's just a fast-paced city lifestyle, everything kind of squished together in a rampant like freeway that's going way too fast for most people to kind of separate and decompress and understand like patience and waiting and being immersed in the present, which is it takes some skills and development over time to kind of figure out how to navigate that. And your books are highly recommended as a resource to kind of go on that journey if you're someone that is empathic or sensitive. I want to ask you, what is the best advice that you have ever received?
I think the best advice is to trust myself and trust my intuition and stay with that. Because the intuition is the best friend you'll ever have. And so trusting myself, I think, is the best advice.
Mm. Yeah, when you get to the point where you can listen to yourself and trust yourself is a very good idea. And most people, even empathics for me, that I'm like, oh, don't say anything, don't mention anything, when you can help or resolve a situation or resolve one for you that feels that you know yourself well enough that you can have that internal guidance that will direct you. And so my last question is always about, what is the biggest thing you've ever learned from something that you tried and maybe failed at, but still succeeded if you tried it again? What is the biggest thing that you took away from that learning curve that you have now developed as an adult?
Well, I think when I first opened up my private practice in psychiatry, I had a patient and she had depression, and I put her on antidepressants and she got so much better. And then I had an intuition, a dream that she was going to try and kill herself with the pills I had given her. And I didn't, because there was no signs to indicate that, I didn't listen to my dream, and she overdosed on the medication I had given her and ended up in a coma for 3 weeks. So thank God she lived, and we continued working together. But that taught me that as a physician, I had to honor my intuition. Otherwise, I risked harming my patients. It was just devastating for me. So it was a real turning point for me, that experience, and how I can't afford to ignore my intuition when treating patients.
Yeah, it's a prime thing if you have that intuitive nature, which most females have something like that, especially if you have kids or you have a sense that something's happening without really realizing what it is. And sometimes we avoid it, and you need it the most when it comes calling or is trying to wake you up to see something that you've done or experienced. But a prime learning thing that you've developed after that, being in touch with self and understanding your intuition and what it's done. Thank you very much, Dr. Judith Orloff, for being here today. I appreciate your time. I'm excited for everyone to pick up your newest book, The Genius of Empathy: Practical Skills on Healing Your Sensitive Self, Your Relationship, and the World. Dr. Orloff is a member of UCLA Psychiatry clinical faculty and is a New York Times best-selling author and has been on a myriad of other publications and interviews. I appreciate your time today, and thank you very much for enlightening us all on our empathic and sensitive journey.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Tranquility Magazine Podcast. Please subscribe and add your review and thoughts for our next interview type.